and welcome to GameSack, and at long last we are talking about the MSX.
Oh man, this is a good one, because for me anyways, I really don't know anything about this thing, as back in the day it was never mentioned around. And what does it stand for anyway? The M is for Matsushita System...
No. Let me tell you a little bit about the MSX.
Oh, good.
The MSX platform is not a specific computer in and unto itself, but rather many different models were manufactured by many different brands around the world. It was actually an attempt by Microsoft of Japan to standardize home computers. There were 4 iterations of the design: the MSX, the MSX2, the MSX2 Plus, and the MSX Turbo R. Each one was backwards compatible with the ones below it. For this video, we're using a Japanese Panasonic MSX2. It contains a Zilog Z80A CPU running at 3.58 MHz, 128K of RAM, 512 colors, 32 sprites on screen, and PSG sound. The MSX1 offered only single color sprites and far less color overall. Most machines feature 2 cartridge slots for connecting things which extend the capabilities of the system, like sound expansion carts. Like the Sharp X68000, which we covered before, games were not released in any standardized form, often appearing in different box styles and even different cartridge shapes. Even the boxes for the computers themselves were different. The box for this one features a green soldier creature with tubes going straight into his leg. And if that doesn't tell you that you need to buy an MSX, nothing will. The MSX enjoyed its greatest popularity in Japan, selling more than 5 million units there alone, and least popular in the US, where people barely even knew of its existence.
Wow, Microsoft, really?
Yeah.
That's very interesting. I had no idea. But
Well,
it's cool.
now you know.
I do. That video was very enlightening.
And knowing is half the battle, Dave.
Well, hopefully more than half the battle is the games.
Yes, because we've got a lot to show you. What's a good computer system without lots of good games, and maybe even some mediocre ones?
We'll find out. Sky Jaguar from Konami is a fairly early MSX1 cart released in 1984. This one is a pretty simple vertical shooter. Just shoot things and don't get hit. Every now and then you'll get a power-up which can make your shot a little bit better. You'll fly through 3 scenes before you get to what I guess is a boss who's fairly easy to beat. Then you'll do it all again, only it gets tougher. The scrolling is pretty choppy, and that's just how it is when most MSX games decide to scroll. There's also not much music here, and the sound effects can be kind of grating. Still, it's kind of fun in small doses. Frontline by Taito is another simple 1984 game for the MSX1. It's an overhead run and gun and you can shoot, but the enemies can shoot too. But you have something most of them don't have, and that's unlimited grenades. I just wish that they were more effective. Now I suppose you're a soldier invading an evil camp or something like that, but to me it kinda looks like you're some kid going on a shooting rampage and the law is just out to stop you. Let's face it, you are the bad guy. Eventually they bring out rudimentary tanks to get you. But this is pretty much what to expect with early MSX1 games. Contra came to the MSX2 in 1989 from Konami. Like a lot of MSX games, this one doesn't scroll, so all of the action takes place on static screens. What's interesting about this is that it helps make the game a lot easier, among other things, which I'll get to in just a bit. You don't have to kill everything on a screen. You can usually just run by it if you want, and once you get to the next screen, the enemies you left behind won't follow you. This makes the vertical levels a breeze because really all you need to do is jump to the top of the screen and suddenly you're taken to the next one. And there's no way to fall to your doom, at least not in this stage here. Another thing that makes things easier is that now you have a life bar. If you get hit, you just bounce back and lose a bit of life. And once the bar is gone, I'll bet you can guess what happens. You only have 3 lives, no continues, and no Konami code. But you can earn a lot of extra lives by scoring high enough. The weapons are also handed out differently. You can collect the weapon icons, but they don't give you a new weapon right then and there. Instead, you'll need to get to large gun icons. This lets you choose from the different weapons you've collected. And there's no spread at all. That sucks! So yeah, the game's pretty easy. I mean, I completely beat it on my first try here, and wait, nope. There are some extra levels. In fact, there's quite a few extra levels here. In this lava stage, you can die by falling into it, so be careful. Overall, the game is still really fun. The visuals are well done for the system, and I like how the trees look here in the snow stage. The MSX is a graphical powerhouse that's so hot that it must have melted all the snow in this stage. I'm just kidding, it's not that hot. The music is also really good with the familiar tunes that you know, but they sound really nice here thanks to Konami's special SCC sound chip that they like to put in a lot of their cartridges. Pretty much a must-have for the MSX.
Penguin Adventure from Konami is definitely one of the more interesting MSX1 games. You play as a penguin off to rescue his beloved girlfriend or wife or something. The game plays in a third-person perspective, which is not something you saw often on the system at all. Basically, you're just running along the stage and you have a distance meter at the top of the screen which tells you how far you have to go. You also have a timer that's counting down, so you better hurry. Along the way, you'll need to jump over pits and if you can, catch the fish that jump out of the holes. You can control your speed by pressing up and down on the directional pad, but when it's too slow, it can be harder to jump over pits and the like. If you bump into anything or get caught into a pit, you'll come to a complete stop until you regain your composure or jump out. Some pits have a shop where the guy demands that you buy something. These items range from a weapon which will let you shoot some of the enemies to others which are far more cryptic in nature. And this shop owner gets really mad when you stop buying things. But there are other shop owners out there that are friendlier and with lower prices if you can find them. One item that you'll really want is the feather, which lets you control yourself during a jump. It's really hard to get this one early on as I don't think there are enough available fish, but it really helps. The little propeller beanie will also keep you in the air longer during your jumps, so try to get these as soon as you can. There's also in-stage power-ups that you can get when a heart floats in from the side. As the heart's on screen, it will change colors each time you land a jump. If you can, try to grab it while it's blue, and that will let you float in a little cloud for a while. This helps you avoid obstacles and grab fish more easily. Or yellow, which turns you invincible for a little bit, but be careful because you can still get stopped by pits and some other objects. Every third stage ends with a boss encounter, and you just really need to break the ground around him. This game might be a touch too difficult for newcomers. There are things that sometimes feel completely unavoidable and the game moves too slowly for you to react to them. Also, your hitbox feels quite large and you only have 3 lives unless you earn more. Still though, this is one of those games where I keep trying. The key is to get those items I mentioned as early as you can. Sure, there are warps that you can use if you find one accidentally or look at an online guide, but I spent way too much time looking for a specific hole which looks exactly like all the other holes to properly enjoy playing. Plus, I want to see all of the stages, not just some of them. And the game has a ton of stages. There's also bonus stages you can go to if you happen to jump at the right place at the right time. Here you're suddenly above the Earth collecting space fish and avoiding meteors, just like penguins tend to do. The aforementioned third-person visuals are great, and I love how each stage is different, at least all the ones I've seen so far. Even the music is really good. This game is actually the sequel to Antarctica Venture, which was released for the system 2 years prior in 1984. It's similar in both concept and execution, but Penguin Adventure is by far the better of the 2 games. And yes, this little penguin is one of the ships that you can select in Konami's Proteus series. This title also has the distinction of being the very first game Hideo Kojima ever worked on. He wasn't the head guy, but he worked on it. This is a fantastic little game that's a must-have for every MSX owner if you can get it. Alright, moving right along. You enjoying the MSX so far, Dave?
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, it isn't as strong as I thought it would be, but it's not bad. It has its qualities, that's for sure.
Oh, I agree with that. Anyway, always more games to talk about.
Black Onyx 2 from ASCII is a primitive dungeon crawler for the MSX1. Old computer fans might appreciate this one. The original 1984 Black Onyx bears the distinction of being one of the first RPGs made specifically for the Japanese market, though it was brought to the European MSX in 1985. I'm not sure how Black Onyx 2 here differs as it was brought out in 1986. The Japanese version I'm playing here is of course mostly in Japanese, but enough is in English to figure out what you're doing. You play this one entirely with a keyboard, moving around a dungeon to kill monsters and whatnot. The yellow walls are doors. You get into battles which can be hard to win. You'll also find other items and stuff. Not really my type of game, especially since there's no music and very little sound. Check it out if you like old dungeon crawlers. It's better than you might think once you get used to it. Sega's Fantasy Zone got ported over. This is an MSX1 game. As a result, the colors are very limited and the scrolling is extremely choppy. Basically, the premise of this one is to fly your ship in either direction and destroy all of the bases in a stage. I mean, if you can actually see them. The choppy visuals here make it hard to see bases and enemies, and the slowness of it all makes it even harder to react. Once you destroy all of the bases, you fight the stage boss. As you kill enemies, they'll drop coins for you to collect. Occasionally, a shop appears where you can temporarily power up your ship or buy new lives and stuff. It's fun for its time, but I really don't recommend playing it on the MSX here. It's almost painful. In 1988, Taito brought Rastan Saga to the system, and you need at least an MSX2 to play this one. This is a game about a Conan-like barbarian on a hack-and-slash adventure killing mythical creatures and stuff. The arcade original is fantastic, and the Master System port is fun as well. The MSX2 version here seems to take after the Master System version in many regards. Even some of the sound effects are the same. Of course there's no scrolling, but be careful not to go back to a previous screen as enemies do regenerate. Along the way you'll grab icons which can help you out, but a few can actually hinder you. You'll also get better weapons which will last for a limited amount of time. Each stage consists of an outdoor area followed by an inside castle or cave type area. After that is your boss fight, and most of these are more faithful to the arcade than the Master System version. The graphics are pretty good, at least the backgrounds are. The sprites are a different story. Rastan looks fine, but the enemies have 3 colors max, and one of those colors is transparent and you can see right through them. The music is definitely Rastan and sounds like the Master System version. If the console was hungover after a night of heavy drinking, that is. In fact, as a whole, the entire game feels pretty sloppy, like it's struggling really hard. There's tons of slowdown and just a general lack of polish. Still, it's a fun game and really easy too. Anyone can beat it. Congratulations!
Golvelius got its start on the old MSX1 here, where it's called Devil Golvelius. It's kind of a Zelda clone, but not really. You have an overworld that you wander around on and kill enemies. Holes will open up and you go in and talk to fairies or buy items. You even have to buy the ability to carry more money, or find as the game calls it. Once you increase the amount of money you carry, you can buy better stuff which will allow you to explore further. But the game also has side-scrolling levels. The problem here is that you must press up to jump, and that makes it really tough to control and not run into the enemies. There are also auto-scrolling overhead scenes where you need to be really careful to avoid the enemies and also the walls of the caverns. These end in a boss fight. Overall, this is much weaker than the Master System version that we all know and love. Well, a few of us who are familiar with the Master System know and love anyway. But it's still good. After the Master System version came out, Golvelius was remade on disc for the MSX2 as New Devil Golvelius. This is pretty much completely different than the MSX1 cartridge version, and some people refer to this as Golvelius 2, but it's not a sequel. The graphics are much more detailed since it's on the MSX2 now, and it begins in a more traditional RPG style set in a town. You need to talk to people and unlock this and that before you get out to set on your journey. The side-scrolling levels are back, and holy crap, look how smooth the scrolling is! Did someone sneak a voodoo graphics card into my MSX when I wasn't looking? The scrolling here is much smoother. I'm not even sure how they did it. Whatever the case, Compile clearly had the most skill when it came to programming for the MSX2. This one takes a lot of stuff that was in the Master System version and fleshes it out here and even rearranges it. If you have an optional FM pack, as it's commonly called, you can even play the game with FM music. It's actually pretty good. It sounds better than the Master System's FM music somehow, despite using the same exact sound chip. But hey, if you prefer PSG, then just boot the game up without the FM pack plugged in. This is a great game, and it's even better if you happen to understand Japanese.
SNK made sure that MSX2 owners didn't miss out on Ikari Warriors, simply called Ikari here. This is kind of an interesting version, as there are often tons of enemies on screen at once trying to kill you. One thing that I really like is that after you kill an enemy, their bloody corpse stays on screen so you can admire your work. And all these dead bodies let you know just how many people you actually kill in games like these. The tanks are just an icon to be picked up, and once you get in one, it's a simple one-colored sprite which looks a bit out of place with the rest of the visuals. But hey, it's good for killing enemies, so that's all I need. You can get a bunch of different power-ups, and of course you always have your trusty grenade, which is vital in this game. Extra lives seem to be handed out pretty often. That's a good thing because there's no continues. Otherwise, this is a pretty good game of Ikari Warriors. The Ys games are even on the MSX too, and as you know, we love Ys here on GameSack. You're Adol, and you're off to find the 6 books of Ys. You'll also get to fight monsters without swinging your sword or pressing a button. Most people hate this, but you know what, I'm used to it, so I'll live. They can hate all they want. The graphics are similar to the Master System port in many regards, but seem to be at a higher resolution. Most of Yuzo Koshiro's music is here, but they changed it in a few spots and put new stuff in. If all you have is an MSX, this is a good game for it. However, Ys 2 steps it up with an animated intro similar to the TurboGrafx CD version with some nice smooth scrolling. The gameplay has to be smoother too, right? Well, kind of. Obviously, it's still pretty choppy, but it runs much faster than the first game. I don't really know Ys 2 as much as I do the first one, but everything seems to be here. There seems to be a bit more detail this time around in everything, and overall I feel it plays better than the MSX2 version of the first game for sure. Ys 3 is also on the MSX2, spanning a massive 5 discs. Wow, I don't know why they even bothered, just look how slow it moves. I can appreciate that they did some parallax scrolling, but I really wish they hadn't so it could run faster. Plus, there's a lot of disc swapping almost everywhere you go, and it gets old really fast. This is definitely the last system you'd ever want to get your Ys 3 fix on. Not recommended.
The Aleste Shooter series from Compile got a port to the MSX2. This series got its start on the Master System and was brought over to the West as Power Strike. Basically, it's an overhead shooter where you always have a main weapon and a sub-weapon. The little yellow P-chips power up your main weapons, but it takes a lot of them. There are 8 different sub-weapons represented by the different numbers that you can grab. Sadly, they're on a timer of 80 seconds and they'll revert back to sub-weapon 1 when they run out. And sub-weapon 1 kinda sucks. If you die, you'll also revert back to number 1 and also the weakest form of your main weapon. My favorite sub-weapons are numbers 8 and then 3, and so are yours. This game is pretty relentless, as the better you do, the more intense the game tries to get. That means you're always on your toes no matter what. The screen often gets really crowded. I wonder if Compile even knew the limitations of the MSX2 before deciding to put hundreds of things on screen everywhere at once. So, as a result, there's a lot of slowdown. It's easier than the Master System game mainly because they give you a ton of extra lives, but it's in no way easy. The graphics are good with smooth scrolling and a bit more detail than the Master System original. They even added a few brand new stages for you to sweat through. The music is similar to the Master System, but it sounds a bit different in both PSG and FM. Not necessarily better or worse, just slightly different. But play this one in FM if you have an FM pack. Aleste 2 came out for the system the very next year. This one sticks to the same formula as the original, collecting numbered sub-weapons and powering them up. However, this one lets you choose a numbered weapon in the beginning if you like. This is the weapon you'll begin the game with, and also the one you'll start with after losing a life, which will happen. This one's a lot tougher than the first, mainly because the enemy patterns are so off-the-wall sporadic. A lot of them will make a beeline straight towards your ass and follow you around, so yeah, you're gonna die a lot. Still though, it's a very good shooter that's well designed throughout its 3 discs. There are fewer weapons here this time, but they do very different things. My favorite number 8 isn't here, but number 3 is, and that's a good go-to sub-weapon. However, I'm really starting to like number 4 as it's a homing shot. Even at its weakest, it's fairly effective. I'd love to see how it is if I could stay alive long enough to get it powered up. The stages are quite long, most of them having at least one mid-boss. The boss fights have also evolved as well. Instead of stationary objects just shooting at you like in the first game, this one has bosses that actually move around the screen. There's tons of enemies on screen a lot of the time, and of course this slows down the MSX quite a bit, but that's to be expected. It really doesn't detract from the fun, and honestly I rarely even noticed it. The graphics are good and, once again, move smoothly. And while not as nice as in the first game, the music is still fairly pleasant to listen to. Aleste Gaiden is an offshoot of the series and can only be had on Compile Disc Station 4, which was a demo disc / magazine type of deal. This one is unusual that you don't fly a spaceship but rather a little dude running around, similar to Elemental Master on the Genesis. But in this one you can jump, and you'll often need to over large holes and chasms and whatnot. There's 3 different weapons you can get: a ninja star, a red thingy, and a blue laser. Each weapon can be powered up a bit by collecting more like icons. Seriously though, the only weapon worth having are the ninja stars, as the other 2 are way too slow to be useful. You can also get up to 2 shadow guys that act as options, which will definitely help you out. The game itself though really isn't that great. The enemy patterns can be rather annoying, and there really isn't a whole lot to this one. The visuals are decent, I guess. I mean, how many statues of liberty did we need that ended up getting buried in this future? But the music is not very good at all, and there's not a whole lot of variety in it. In fact, the PSG music actually sounds better than the FM. Overall, this one really doesn't have that much to offer. I can certainly understand why it's not a full retail game.
All right, man, this is actually shaping up to be a pretty cool little computer thing with a game attachment to it, but of course, the thing that would push it over for me is a good Castlevania game.
Well, thankfully, we have the game attachment for the MSX that'll let you play the Castlevania.
Really?
Game attachment? What the hell is he talking about? Anyway, we've got more games coming up, and maybe Dave will get to talk about some Vampire Killer. Scion from Sony and Hitbit is a vertical shooter that will blow you away! Well, okay, not really, but for a 1985 MSX1 game, it's kind of interesting. You fly a ship around, which can, of course, destroy enemies. Every once in a while, you'll get an add-on for your ship, which will let you fire off a ground shot. Use this to destroy all of the flashing targets below. Once you do that, the upper layer disappears, and it's on to the next scene. At the end of the third, you face a huge end boss! Actually, it's pretty anticlimactic. Win that, and then the game loops. I like that they even have some parallax scrolling in this one, and it's pretty fun once you get used to the choppiness. Super Laydock from T&E Soft is pretty damn ambitious for an MSX1 game. This one is also an overhead shoot 'em up, but it doesn't play like something from 1985. I mean, this came out in 1987, that's probably why, but it plays like a more modern game. You'd expect to be able to get power-ups in each stage, but you don't. Instead, you earn them after you beat a stage, and between stages you can choose your sub-weapon. One of them, for example, lets you hit targets on the ground just like in Scion. And then there are others which are definitely more fancy. But be careful, because if you choose the wrong one, you could end up screwed, as not all of them destroy stuff on the ground, and often you're going to need to be able to do that. This one has boss fights, music during the gameplay, and even cutscenes. It can also be enjoyed by 2 people simultaneously. Pretty cool, I say. Exerion from Jalico is one of my favorite MSX1 shooters. This one is more of a third-person style, believe it or not, kinda like Space Harrier or even Afterburner. Obviously, your mission is to shoot everything you can and get the highest score possible. As you move around, the background shifts to and fro. It probably looks really bad to you, but somehow it just works. I always know where my ship is, even when you think it'd get lost in some of the crazy colors and designs. You have 2 weapons, a basic double shot that you can fire as much as you'd like, but you can only fire one at a time. The other button fires a very rapid single shot which pulverizes the enemy formations. But it's going to run out pretty quick. You'll need to wait for it to recharge itself, and this number here indicates how many shots you can fire. Yeah, the game doesn't take long before the backgrounds and the enemies start to loot, but it's still really fun no matter what. I was actually really surprised by this one.
Castlevania got a release on the MSX2 called Vampire Killer, which came out a month after the Famicom game. This one plays a bit different from your standard Castlevania game of the time. Sure, you have the platforming whipping action that you know and love. What's different is the flow of each level. Along the way, you'll find yellow keys that'll open up blue treasure chests laying around. These will give you items that for the most part feel useless. There's a white key hidden somewhere in the level and you have to find it to move on. Typically it's hidden in the walls. There's also people hidden in the walls that will give you items for the hearts you collect. Sadly though, it has some issues that really make the game feel incomplete. Firstly, whipping candles should be easy, and if you whip a candle it should break on the first try. Not in this game. You can whip a candle many times before it finally breaks. It gets to the point where you don't want to put out the effort, so you just bypass all of them. Secondly, there's lots of cheap areas where you walk into the next screen only to be hit immediately by an enemy. Nothing is more annoying than this. Not even Joe.
Seriously, dude, what the
Especially since there's no Castlevania pot roast laying around for you to devour and restore your health. There's not a single slab of meat anywhere in this castle. Then there's your whip, which is very short, which means you have to be closer to your enemies, which means better chances for you to take damage. You can get other weapons in here like the axe or Cross of Fear. These are awesome, especially the Cross of Fear. It goes all the way across the screen and gives you that much needed distance between you and your enemy. The bad part is that if you don't catch it on its return, it's gone. Yes, it's gone for good and you're back to your little whip. But hey, the game does have some sharp graphics and of course an amazing soundtrack. The music is so good that you want to keep trying. While this isn't anywhere near my favorite Castlevania game, it's still fun to play if you can forgive it its flaws.
If you like shooters and also hate having money, you can play Spaceman Bow from Konami. The galaxy is threatened and your fleet is attacked. But you managed to make it out in your little ship at the last moment. You are Spaceman Bow and you need to save the entire galaxy. You go, Spaceman Bow! This is a horizontal shooter for the MSX2, and like most of them, you get power-ups to upgrade your ship. These include a speed up, a missile, and either a wave type of weapon or a more condensed linear shot. There's also options which you can reposition with the tap of the other button, and you'll need to use this to get ahead, especially in some of the later levels where it starts scrolling vertically. Finally, there's a smart bomb type of thing which activates a couple of seconds after you grab it. At the top of the screen, you have a large power bar. This of course indicates the strength of your weapons that you're using, and it's raised by grabbing the red icons. Once you get it high enough, part of it will turn yellow. The yellow part decreases over time unless you keep grabbing the icons. Eventually, it settles on the highest red part, which is about 50% of its overall potential strength. At the end of each stage, of course, are some very large bosses which are pretty fun to fight. Once you figure them out, which isn't difficult by the way, they go down pretty quick. The game scrolls smoothly for an MSX2 game in every direction, but it's still kind of choppy, especially the sprites. I'm not sure if it's any better if it's played on an MSX2 Plus or not, but this sprite choppiness along with some of the generously sized hitboxes can make the game feel pretty tough when you first start playing it. Again, the choppy sprites make it very hard to react. But you are Spaceman Bow, and after some time you grow more accustomed to the choppy visuals and what you can and can't get away with. And once you do that, you'll start performing a lot better. That's when the game starts becoming really fun. This reminds me of an R-Type game and its challenge. There are unlimited continues that start you back at the same checkpoint you do if you lose a life, so basically you have unlimited lives. This really makes me want to keep trying again and again, and if you do, you'll eventually get past the part you're stuck on. The visuals are pretty damn nice, and to their credit, they attempt a lot with the system, like diagonal scrolling and even a touch of parallax. There are times when there's quite a bit on screen as well. And of course, since it's a shooter and since it's Konami, the music is absolutely outstanding. Hell, it might be the best part of the game. When it's all said and done, this is the best horizontal shooter for the system for sure. So if you like choppy but good shooters with plenty of challenge, pick this one up. Maybe get 2 or 3 since it's only $500 or so on the low end.
Here's Metal Gear for the MSX2. This was the first Metal Gear ever released, and it differs quite a bit from the NES version that was released later that same year. As you know, you play as Solid Snake, and it's your job to infiltrate Outer Heaven and destroy Metal Gear. The way they'd like you to play it is as a stealth action game. Personally, I've always hated this. I hated being sneaky and just wanted to go in, kill people, do my mission, and get out. The problem with doing it that way is that you won't last long. If you're noticed by guards or cameras, the alarm goes off and you get bum rushed by more guards, and then it won't take long before you're dead. If you do choose to be stealthy like the game wants, you'll be doing a lot of traversing back and forth finding items here and there that will help you progress. Things like key cards, guns, and gas masks. Overall, the game plays well and the music is pretty damn good. This was a well-received title for the system. And Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake saw a release in 1990 for the MSX2. The game was again developed by Kojima and is the actual sequel to the first game. Snake's Revenge on the NES is not the true sequel as it was developed by a completely different team. Anyway, as you can see, the game got a graphical overhaul and everything looks different. Even Solid Snake looks different. He looks like a sad mix of Sylvester Stallone and Emilio Estevez. Plus his face looks rather fat, like he's in no shape to be infiltrating Zanzibar land. Maybe he thinks that Zanzibar is a type of candy bar that he's willing to go to any length to find. But while he's looking for the candy bar, he might as well rescue a kidnapped scientist and destroy another Metal Gear. Everything from the first game applies here, from the sneaky gameplay to finding items that will further your quest. It's a bit slower this time around, but it doesn't hinder the gameplay. The game isn't easy, and you'll know this when you fight the first boss. It's okay though, if you want to continue, you can just use the easy to remember password. Again, the music, well for me anyway, is the highlight. But still, if you like this type of game and don't own an MSX2, you can unlock it on Metal Gear Solid 3 for various consoles.
Snatcher from Konami is great, but how about SD Snatcher, which is exclusive to the MSX2? That's right, Snatcher needs to be cutesified in the worst way. Or is it the best way? Yeah, maybe. This is basically an RPG-style remake of Snatcher with super deformed characters. You're Gillian Seed, the newest Junker. A Junker is the one who hunts down Snatchers and destroys them. And of course, a Snatcher is a Terminator/replicant, whatever you want to call it. Same thing. The story is more or less the same, but lots of things have been changed around. For example, in this one you get to actually meet Gibson in the beginning of the game while he's still alive. And although you're a junker and you're working for junker headquarters, you now have to buy weapons and medicine from them. I guess they're not too serious about stopping that Snatcher menace. The game takes place in an overhead view with little SD characters that walk around, totally unlike the original's digital comic style. Enemies walk around openly, and if you touch them, you get into a battle. These are pretty cool, but you might take a bit of damage before you truly get the hang of them. You have a crosshair that you aim to attack certain parts of an enemy. This will have different results. For example, shooting their legs or their wheels will slow them down so they're less likely to move out of the way and dodge your attacks. And they do have a very bad habit of moving out of the way of your shots. Shooting the so-called eye will make it harder for them to aim at you when they shoot. Shooting their guns can stop them from attacking you, but they may also self-destruct if you do that, giving you very little in the way of experience points. Also, shooting their antennas can prevent them from calling for reinforcements. You can also select Metal Gear, and this is basically the auto battle mode, and he'll select what he thinks is the best option at the time. This works well for a lot of things, but personally I like doing it myself. There are plenty of items that you can buy back at Junker headquarters which can help you out in the battle. These can do things like paralyze an enemy for a few attacks to give you an advantage or even completely destroy them. You'll also need to charge your gun as you don't have unlimited ammo. Just like any RPG, you'll be wandering through large maze-like structures filled with enemies and even treasure chests. Sometimes you'll even find extra shots for your gun after defeating an enemy. You'll need them. This game is pretty grindy. You'll have to be about level 10 or so to beat the first real boss here, and you're going to need to get into a ton of battles to get to level 10. Gillian doesn't move around smoothly at all, which can make it an exercise to place him in front of people or objects, but it is in no way game-breaking. I like how enemies are just wandering all over the place, even inside apartment building hallways. Of course, once you get what you need from the room in the apartment, the enemies are all completely gone, inside and out. This game comes on 3 discs, but it requires an external cartridge to play which contains the SCC sound chip as well as 64K of extra RAM. If you want to play it on a flash cart, you're going to need a patched file. The music is really good, and a lot of it is unique to this version of Snatcher. The graphics are very well done for this system, looking really good for an 8-bit computer and seems to use the MSX2's higher resolution. There's also English translations out there for your emulator or your flash cart. One is free and isn't of the greatest quality. The other one from Melancholia, which is what I'm playing here, is absolutely fantastic, but the patch is going to cost you 12.5 euros or just over $15 US. It's all up to you. Melancholia sounds like something you get from a mosquito bite. The game is really, really good though, and it's fun to see this kind of a take on Snatcher. Alright, there you have it, the MSX. Dave, what did you think of the MSX?
As said before, it has some strong points and some not so strong points, but surprisingly, the controller, for as ugly as it is actually fairly comfortable, I thought. I thought it was kind of...
Well, you can always get different controllers, different manufacturers have their own, but you're lucky to get the little tiny Panasonic one that we had in this video.
Nicely in my hands, so... What are your thoughts? I mean, this is your thing, so...
Yeah, well, it's a good little system. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, it's kind of primitive, but that's okay. Things don't always have to be super advanced like the X68000.
Right.
But, it's interesting to see where a lot of these games like Metal Gear and whatnot came from. Golvelius, I really enjoyed. It's fun to see this kind of stuff.
Yeah, definitely. A nice little oddity from the past.
Yeah, and what are your guys' opinion of the MSX? Do you have any favorite games that we didn't check out that we should check out? Let us know. In the meantime, thank you for watching GameSack.
I was thinking I really like those LS games on the MSX, but... What's this? Power Strike 2? That's gotta be an LS game. It's LS 2, isn't it? Oh. Oh my god. I don't think that's supposed to happen. I think I'm gonna leave. Oh boy.
What the hell is that smell? My MSX!